Hey everybody, I'm Zach and I like movies, and I'm coming with you with a little special video today because, well, it's been almost 5 years to the date of when the Joker movie came out back in 2019, and we have a surprise big budget sequel coming out this week, Joker Folie 2. And I thought it would be a good time as any to sort of revisit the movie again and kind of see how well it holds up, if it does at all. And honestly, the legacy of this movie is kind of interesting, and even just kind of sort of reminded myself of its history, and especially of the hype when it was coming out, because it was kind of interesting. We had there were the stories about Todd Phillips, the guy most known for bro-y, very fratty comedies like the Hangover movies and Road Trip or Due Date. This guy was going to helm a sort of Joker movie, but it kind of wasn't going to be connected to any Batman stuff and any franchise stuff in it, and it was mostly going to be very much more of a character study, which that sounded like something that could really spice things up and are very in the oversaturated comic book superhero market. And you had Joaquin Phoenix attached. You can always bet on him to give a great performance. Saying Joaquin Phoenix gives a good performance is like saying water is wet. Then there was it was getting slowly rolled down, and there was a lot of hype for it. It won the prestigious Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival, but there was also a lot of controversy because there was a lot of stupid murmurings and hand wringings in the media about whether or not it will cause mass shootings, which was absolutely ridiculous from the start. It kind of felt like they were trying to recapture some hysteria about that. It felt reminiscent of video games causing violence from the Columbine shooting era, but nevertheless, and despite its controversies and despite some mixed to positive reviews from critics and from audiences, it went on to score $1 billion. It's some of its scenes are considered iconic now, and it went on to be nominated for something like a dozen Oscars, and winning at least two. One of them being finally getting a Best Actor win for Joaquin Phoenix, and also getting, in my opinion, two very undeserved nominations for Best Picture and Director. Because I still do not care for this movie. I think this movie is just, it's so punching above its own weight, and it's so broad and so hollow, and what's frustrating mostly about Joker is that it's not completely without strengths, and it's not completely without talent, because there are a number of things I can say about the movie. Of course, Joaquin is great, and I think it is a really good performance from him. He's not just kind of going through the motions. It's a performance that he can do in his sleep, especially by then. I always kind of felt like Arthur Fleck was felt like something of a carry on from other performances from him, and I've always felt like these were giving him the reward for this felt hey, we kind of you kind of deserved it for The Master back in 2012, so here you go. We're just gonna give you an Oscar just in case you don't get the chance, you don't get nominated again. But honestly, it is a good performance, because there's a lot of good choices being made in terms of how skinny he is, and a lot of his physicality, the way he runs with his legs up high, even when he's he's always wearing clown shoes, even when he isn't. I also I like the way he dances and sort of holds himself, and I also like his laugh. Even when he's genuinely laughing, it's always it's way too loud and a little out of tune, and very squeaky. He doesn't realize that it might sound off-putting. I can't do it right now. But when he isn't, when he's like doing that like forced laugh, was like nervous condition laugh, it looks, I like that it looks painful, and even when he's like trying to like like choke it back, it looks like it hurts, and I think those are interesting choices uh, for for this character that would eventually call himself Joker, and also I really still like the cinematography. Lawrence Sher, who was the DP, I think did a wonderful job. I think, yeah, while it is clearly emulating uh, movies like Taxi Driver and the kind of comedy, I mean, for example, those are the big two obvious poles of this movie. But I think there is a real appreciate a real grunginess to the look of it, to the general feel of it, that I think is very appreciative. I do question why it was shot digitally instead of on film, because it's going so out of its way to sort of replicate a familiar film like sort of texture to it, but it doesn't. But it is noticeable that it is like an homage, sort of an homage, and like what you are clear, like you're aware of what it's going for, but it is still successful in its own right. And combine that in the general like look and feel of it with the score, this very wonderful cello heavy score by Icelandic composer Hilda Gunnadóttir, is makes for a really nice kind of dour mood. I think if there is a reason to get into this movie, it is for just the kind of the general vibe of it. I think it's an interesting move. I think it is interesting that and still, like, I think that first third of this movie, the first act, is pretty strong, and I do see why people get into it from that, because it is a very strong first act. I actually had a really interesting conversation with my brother about this, because he really likes Joker and I don't. But he's always interested in he's interested in this movie through like just the way that you're kind of always there's ambiguity into like what is and isn't quite real, and how Arthur is like kind of his own unreliable narrator. And I think that is interesting, especially in some of the choices of editing, and like whether there's like moments of discontinuity, or moments where the editing like really lets us linger in the discomfort. When he's laughing and he can't stop, and he keeps laughing and he can't stop, and we're just kind of stuck in the discomfort. And that's great, and that's all stuff like that is really well done. And oftentimes there are some decent moments of comedy, like that moment where he drops the gun, that still gets a laugh. There's a moment where he like walks into a door that still gets a good chuckle out of me. But honestly, around some point when the first act kind of transitioned to the second act, when the mood fully settles in and you're just kind of you fall into the rhythms of it, you really kind of feel how kind of hollow this movie is, and how maybe not hollow, but definitely shallow this movie is. And when you get kind of used to it, especially on a rewatch, it really sets in just like how much this movie doesn't really have much much meat on its bones. It honestly kind of is reflective of like Arthur's physicality. It's just kind of skin and bones, and that's mostly because, like, in terms of like what it's saying about like mental illness and societal, like whether it's societal decay or just like class strife, all of it feels very surface level, mostly because in like, say for example, like it'll mention about how Arthur, social services are being the funding will be cut completely from social services, and Arthur is just like he doesn't know how to get medication, but like it'll just kind of drop that off, like it will just be it will mention things that cause stress and anxieties, but like kind of just leave it at that, or and man, and another, and I think all that would be, like one thing, but like this movie is just so self-serious, like like oh my god, to the point that it is so so kind of aggravating to like focus on, and it's so uh man, it's and I guess I wouldn't mind if it's like, if it like wants to be taken so seriously as like a serious piece of art, not like being like, this is not a comic book movie, this is like cinema. No, up yours, Martin Scorsese. We're gonna like take this seriously. But honest to God, every time I would be getting reinvested in Arthur's headspace and sort of like like getting absorbed back into the tone, there would be like a scene that just like completely takes me out of it. Or take any time that they reference that this is set in Gotham, or they have like a scene where Arthur, thinking that he wants to see Thomas Wayne, he will like just have this extended scene where he's interacting with Bruce Wayne, and it's like, oh, I know this isn't real, I know this isn't serious, I know this is a comic book movie. It's not. It wants to kind of remove itself from this sort of comic book movie fare, or I don't know, graphic novel fare, and be like this own, and kind of be like its own thing. It wants to like borrow the iconography of, the Joker and Batman, and sort of borrow that iconography, but still doesn't want to be too far removed. It still wants to. It's not set in a city that you could call Gotham. It's set in the city of Gotham. And sure, the city of Gotham looks like 80s New York, but it's Gotham. There's Arkham Asylum. There is the Wayne family, or my God, like you straight up, I know better than to like critique a movie for not being the movie that I wanted it to be, or I thought it would be, and just kind of review the movie for what it is. But how much more interesting would this movie have been if this wasn't a Joker origin story of sorts, and instead was this kind of Taxi Driver-ish story of a man losing his grip on reality and thought he was the Joker. Like that would, and again, that could be something about, that could, have things to say about, like, again, how maybe not so much how media and comic book media influence us, but what we take out of comic book media. But instead, it's like when it constantly reminds us that this is actually the Joker. Like, I can't take it seriously anymore. I just lose interest. It wants me to take this character transformation seriously, but he's transforming into the Joker instead of, again, a guy who calls himself Joker. And man, and that's stuff like this. And also on the note of self-seriousness, like, this movie like is so dependent on Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, which I honestly don't really mind. I've said this before. I love movies that wear their influences on their sleeve. Like something like a movie like The Substance, for example. That has like a good dozen horror movies in its DNA, from like The Thing and The Shining and some Cronenbergian body horror and Reanimator. I could go on, but the best movies that do that they tend to use our familiarity with this, with the old text, with what it's borrowing from, to either say something new about that subject or with that subject. That's what makes Tarantino movies and his flagrant thievery of old cinema style and straight up plots and plot points so interesting, because he's using these old like movie references to make further commentary and into his story. But like here, when Todd Phillips is like channeling off, is like a borrowing so heavily from Taxi Driver, I kept kind of wondering like what he gets out of Taxi Driver, or how he sees Taxi Driver, because like the whole time, like it's wanting us so bad to sympathize with Arthur, from how just it beats you over the head with how sad and miserable his life is. Like literally nothing can get right. And sure, that does lean into like the kind of tragic comedy angle of it, like, oh, sir, it's so, my life is so sad, nothing is going right. But it sort of just becomes repetitive. Like that angle just becomes repetitive and honestly kind of boring. But also like with Taxi Driver, you don't feel sorry for Travis when he's like being being cruel and thinking these cruel thoughts. It's like the point, and it's the thing, and it's not like the world and society makes Travis go crazy. Like, no, that doesn't happen. Like the thing is that Travis is a reflection of that same rot of society that he constantly puts himself in, and there are people that are worse than Travis. Like that's the point of the Martin Scorsese scene in Taxi Driver. There's already somebody who is like yeah, you're following a guy who is racist, who is misogynist, and there's somebody who is even worse than him. And to have like this sort of like notion that like the ills of society and the ills of like class strife is like what furthers Arthur's mental degradation, feels again, it just feels kind of surface level, and it makes me wonder like what he really got out of Taxi Driver, or what he thinks Taxi Driver is even about, or how he like how he thinks. I'm probably like meta overthinking this, but like it's so aggravating. And man, like again, this movie like really plays its hand really heavily with like how not just how sad Arthur's life is, but like the way it just is so blunt and so simplistic about it. Like the whole plot with like Zazie Beetz, when it like they have the twist that is so obvious from like a fucking mile away, and they still feel the need to like show, oh my god, he imagined her the whole time, he's crazy. It's so, oh my god, it's honestly one of the worst parts about the movie. It was so bad. It was so annoying. And then there's like the whole part with like at the end where like he kind of gets on this soapbox and he just like goes on this rant about like, oh, like, well, partly starts off with like this whole like part about like, oh, comedy being subjective, which just reminded me of like what Phillips was said when he like chose to stop doing comedies because you can't make fun of anything anymore. And it's something I want to just like take him by the collar and shake him and be like, motherfucker, at the same time that I would have been in a theater watching your Taxi Driver Pagliacci bullshit, I could go 3 screens over and watch Taika Waititi prance about as a little boy's imaginary best friend, Adolf Hitler, and be enchanted and delighted and laughing my ass off. That movie's still good. Jojo Rabbit's good. But yeah, and the more it goes on, the more it builds. It feels like he's just standing on a soapbox, but doesn't really have anything to say. And because it's just so broad enough, and because it's just non-specific enough, that I'm not surprised that people have been able to take literally not just take anything of it, but project anything onto this. It's kind of this. and that's kind of what's so disappointing about Joker, that for all its strengths, with its acting, with its score, with its editing choices, and of course, and the look of it, it's kind of an empty movie that just doesn't say enough of what it wants to. Again, it's punching way above its weight, which on one hand is admirable, but you need more than that. And yeah, that's kind of my overall thoughts. It's a little scattered, but the movie is it's for a movie that is that I find mostly empty. I surprisingly have a lot to say about it, but yeah, that's my feelings on it. I'm seeing the new one tonight. I'm cautiously optimistic, but the early reviews and early reactions do not inspire a lot of confidence. But hey, I could come out feeling differently about it. But yeah, so I guess that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts on Joker? Do you like it? Do you not? Do you also find it overrated? I don't really hate Joker, to be honest, but I do. It is a movie that I like making fun of. Honestly, mostly because like its fans, like the real diehard Joker fans, they glaze this movie up like they've never seen a movie before, and it's always funny every time. But I'll be nice and leave you all alone. So I'm Zach. That's my review. That's my thoughts. I love movies. I have a lot more movies to watch. I will watch movies, and I hope you watch movies too. And I will see you next time.